Good morning, everyone. Happy New Year. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Jenny Williamson, and I am the State Director at EdTrust Massachusetts. And I'm pleased to be here with you this morning as we dive into the results of our most recent statewide parent poll on a timely topic of artificial intelligence and technology in K through 12 education. For those of you who may be new to EdTrust, we are a data and research-driven organization committed to building a more equitable education system in which every child has the opportunity to thrive. And at the core of our work is really partnership. We collaborate with community leaders, educators, students, and especially families from underserved communities, because we believe that those most affected by education policy decisions must have a meaningful voice in shaping them. And that belief is exactly why we conducted this poll. This past fall, in partnership with the Massing Polling Group, we surveyed parents across Massachusetts to understand their knowledge, concerns, and hopes around AI, and at a moment when these tools are rapidly reshaping classrooms around the state and the country. We know that AI is no longer a future concept. It is already influencing students' daily experiences, and it's often doing so faster than guidance or public understanding can keep up. And that's also what makes this such a critical moment, because decisions being made today will shape whether AI expands opportunity for students or deepens existing inequities in our education system. And this is also what makes parent perspective so essential. We know that their insights can help ground this fast moving conversation in real experiences and remind us that innovation must be guided by equity and transparency and trust. This poll marks the 13th in a series that we have conducted since the start of the pandemic, and it's been made possible through the generous support of the Barr Foundation. And I also want to take a moment to just express our sincere gratitude to the many folks at the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education and our partners on the Massachusetts Education Equity Partnership, who played a really key role in helping to shape the content of this poll. Now, before I begin, I want to share just a few quick logistical notes. If you do have questions throughout the event, you can feel free to submit them via the Q&A function. And we've carved out time to address audience questions at the end, so we will be sure to get to them. In addition, we will be recording this presentation and we'll plan to post the webinar recording along with the slides on the EdTrust Mass and MassInc Polling Group websites. Now, I'm sure you're all looking forward to diving in, but before we do, let me first quickly share an overview of what you should expect from our time together today. So here's a clips of the agenda. To start, we will dive into the poll findings with a presentation by Steve Koczela, who's the president of the MassInc Polling Group. Following the poll results, we will hear from Andrea Cote, Assistant Director of Ed Tech at the Massachusetts Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, who will provide some more context on the state's current and emerging work around AI. After that, we will dive into a panel discussion with several key leaders who bring really important perspectives on how we should be navigating this evolving landscape. And then after that, we will close out the event with time for audience questions. So with that, I am excited to kick off this discussion. It is my pleasure to turn it over to Steve Koczela, president of the MassInc Polling Group, who will share some of the key findings from our survey. Steve, over to you. Steve, you're muted.
Thank you, Jenny. We're now 6 years into our use of Zoom, so you'd think I'd have figured it out by now, but here we are. Anyway, thank you, Jenny, and thank you all for joining us today. I am Steve Koczela. I'm the president of the MassInc Polling Group. Very excited to share with you the results of the survey that Jenny mentioned. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen then, and you should now be looking at the slides for the poll entitled Mass Parental Insights on AI and Tech in Schools. So what is the survey that we're talking about? This first slide gives you a few details about what the survey actually is, when it was done, how many people we talked to, etc. It was a survey of just over 1,300 Massachusetts parents, spanning the range of kindergarten through 12th grade children. And as we've done in all of the surveys that we've done together with EdTrust, the poll included oversamples of Black, Latino, and Asian parents. And you'll see that becomes important just because we can break down the results more finely than we would be able to do if we just did kind of a full regular representative sample of parents. In terms of timing, the poll took place in mid-October to mid-November of 2025. And the next bullet basically says the way to think about this is that the survey is representative of both parents overall and then parents overall across the state of Massachusetts. And then you can also think of it as being representative of parents by race. So basically, we weighted it to be sure that demographics are properly represented in each one of those ways. And then, as Jenny mentioned, we owe a big thank you to the Barr Foundation for their ongoing support of this project. So a quick word on key findings. I'm going to go through these a little bit quickly because we're going to dive into all of these in a lot more detail. The first thing to know about the results pretty much throughout the poll is that there's a lot of split. There's a lot of uncertainty. There's parents on both sides of the issue, and not even both sides, but a lot of parents that just aren't sure what to make of it yet. So even as AI is coming quickly and is already here, with the majority of parents saying their students are already using it, you still have a lot of splits and a lot of uncertainty. Some of that is demographic, though not all of it. You'll see some differences between demographic groups and the opinions that parents in different demographic groups hold. And then some is just, parents kind of across the board holding different views of AI and sort of how it should be used and what the benefits and drawbacks may be. Some of those divisions are because there's differences in what parents think about potential uses of AI. So while most think that AI can help with digital literacy and research, for example, there's also, concerns about AI's impact on other parts of the academic experience. There's also concern not just about the actual experience of what might happen to a student or how a student might learn and so forth, but also the risks of AI use. So think things like biased evaluations if it's used in student work, student data privacy, and also inequality as far as access to AI tools. So it's not just about how students might learn, it's actually about the other potential secondary impacts of AI use. As I noted, a majority of parents say that their children are already using AI, and pretty much the older the student gets, the more likely they are to already be using it. But policy has not kept up so far, or parent knowledge of policy has not kept up, and they would like to have a voice in the development of the policy, as you'll see kind of as we get to the end of the presentation. And then one other note, as parents are kind of facing all this, is that most think that digital literacy should be a graduation requirement. So then let's get into some of the numbers that underlie these key findings. The first one here is an open-ended question about how parents feel about AI use in education. And I should note that as you're watching this, all of the question wording is shown here at the bottom of each slide. So if you're wondering how we asked this, what the question exactly said, that's where that information is contained. And as Jenny noted, all of this is all of the top line, the crosstabs, and actually these slides eventually will be posted both on the Massing Polling website as well as the EdTrust Massachusetts website. So what this one shows then is the number of parents who, when asked on an open-ended basis how they feel about the use of AI in education, offered a positive remark, which is what you see in these sort of bluish-greenish numbers, or a negative remark, which is the orange. So just about a third saying positive, offering a positive sentiment, a third offering negative sentiment, and then there's still a lot, as I noted, that are either kind of on the fence or really aren't sure yet what to make of the impact of AI in education at this point. There are some demographic differences here that are worth noting. Men were a bit more likely to offer positive comments than were women. Parents with higher levels of education, slightly more likely, and higher income as well. But then another group that we're going to keep an eye on throughout the presentation is parents of multilingual learners, where you see 46% offered a positive remark. So still a bit less than half, but a much higher number than other parents. So we also then pulled out a couple of the comments and just dropped a couple on here so you can see a couple of illustrative comments of what parents were referring to when they would offer a positive comment. You can see one of those right here. I feel that AI in schools are a positive thing. It's definitely going to be a staple in manufacturing in the near future. So you can see that, if it's going to come already, students should know how to use it. There's definitely that sentiment. There's also the second comment there. You see a parent reflecting on whether or not it's dangerous and if introducing it at a young age could potentially be damaging. And then you see a parent in the third comment there that's kind of on the Southeast Massachusetts portion of the slide. It can be good and bad. Some AI can help them learn, but others can help them cheat. So then this one asks, on a closed-ended basis, overall, what effect do you think AI will have on how kids learn? And the greenish bars here, the two here, are the percent who said very and somewhat positive, which adds up to just about half. And then you've got very somewhat and very negative, which are these bars over here. So just about half say positive, and the rest are distributed between either negative or saying that they just don't know at this point. Once again, you see men are a bit more likely to offer a positive comment about the effect that AI will have on their kids' learning experience. Where women, you've got 39% compared to men, you've got 59% saying that they think it will have a positive impact on their students' learning. You also see parents, again, with a bachelor's and higher income, and then also multilingual learners, once again, offering a bit more of a positive outlook on AI. I'd say that there's not huge differences across when you look at between Black parents, Latino parents, Asian parents, parents of color, how they compare to white parents on these questions. There's actually not as big differences as we see sometimes in opinion on other education topics. We do, however, see that the gender gap persists between groups. So, for example, Black men are more optimistic about AI use than are Black women. And similarly, when you look at Latino parents and Asian parents. This question was about whether parents think that AI will make their student more prepared or less prepared for college or a future career. And you can see that, again, just about a third say more prepared, just about a third say less prepared, and just about a third either don't know or say that it won't make any difference. So again, you've got that kind of a third split that we've seen a couple times already. Once again, you see parents with bachelor's degrees and higher income and parents of multilingual learners a bit more likely to basically take the optimistic side of AI's impact. And then the other group that's worth calling out down here is that parents who say that their classrooms are already using AI are also offering more optimistic takes about what the impact will be on their students' use of AI in education. So the next slide shows one of the key nuances of this, which is that parents actually think that AI will have different impacts on different parts of the education experience. So again, just to quickly orient you, the positive comments are here in sort of bluish green, and the negative view that it's going to hurt each one of these impacts is here in orange. And you can see that a majority, starting from the top of the slide, a majority say that they think it will help students' digital literacy skills. And just about half say researching and judging information sources will be positively impacted. But then as you work your way down the chart, you start to see a lot more trepidation about things, particularly like critical thinking and problem solving down here, second from the bottom, where you see 53 to 28 margin, parents think that it will hurt their students' ability in that area rather than help their ability. And you can see collaborating with others is another one where you see kind of a deeply negative or much more likely for parents to say hurt rather than help when it comes to the impact that it will have. One other way to look at this is basically to take the percent who said help and the percent who said hurt and subtract them from one another to basically get a sense of how many more parents think it will help rather than hurt. And that's what we see here on the next slide. The next slide shows the same question that we just looked at, but it does that subtraction where you subtract the percent who say hurt from the percent who say help. And you can see then that if it's a negative number, it means more people think that it's going to hurt rather than help. And if it's a positive number, then more people think that it will help rather than hurt. And it kind of helps to put a lot of different demographic groups and a lot of information together on one slide when we do it this way. So you can see, for example, that among white parents, the second column in, there's 3 items. The top 3 items where more parents are optimistic than pessimistic, but the rest of them you've got more pessimism. And you can then easily compare those numbers with the next column, which is parents of color. And you can see that for them, there's 2 groups, or there's basically 2 items where more people think that it will hurt rather than help. And then you can use that same kind of general visual scan to see, okay, we once again have men more likely than women to take the optimistic view of the impacts of AI in education. There's only 2 items which are net negative compared to women, where all but the top 3 are net negative. And then once again, you've got both parents of multilingual learners and parents who say their children are already using AI in the classroom that are much more optimistic than any of the other groups on the slide. So speaking of parents who say that their children are using it already, there's a lot of data on this slide, but basically what it asks is how children are already using AI for schoolwork, either in or out of school. And you can see that overall, just to start at the top and quickly orient you, 29% say that their students are using it for checking grammar. And then you can scan across and see that there's an increase on that item, and actually on every other item, in the percent of parents who say that their children are using it as their children get older. So parents of high school students are much more likely than parents of elementary school kids to say that they're using it already. Then when you look all the way down at the bottom, what we've done down here is basically combine them all together to say, did you say your child is using AI for anything, for any of these uses up here? And overall 59% said yes to at least one of the items above. And then again, you can look basically elementary, middle, and high. It goes from about half up to 2/3, up to 70% of students who say that, or parents who say their children are already using AI. Then you've got 76% among multilingual learners and 64% among parents of students with an IEP. Higher use there as well. So one of the key questions that certainly gets discussed a lot in parent groups and that we really wanted to dig in here is whether parents think that the use of AI is cheating. Is it always cheating? Is it sometimes cheating? Or is it not cheating? And I found a pretty large majority in the sometimes category, about 2/3 across groups. Not a ton of variation, a little variation by gender, education, income, not a ton, but 60 to 70% in each case said sometimes. So I think there still is, there's still a lot of nuance in how parents are thinking about that particular issue. So in addition to just how students are using it particularly, there's a range of other issues that the poll explored. And one of them was what policies the school have in place already. The first that we asked about was the student data privacy policy, which we should note is not exclusively related to AI. Of course, that could extend beyond AI as well. But we found there that 64% said yes, that their school does have a student data privacy policy. 37% said yes to an AI academic integrity policy, and 28% for an AI use policy. And then we also just asked whether the parents were aware of their children's teachers using AI in the classroom already, and found that only about a quarter were aware, but you've got about half who say that they don't know at this point. And you actually see a pretty large percentage for each of these items saying that they're just not sure, particularly when it relates to AI policies, not sure whether their school has them or not. And this is one parent with kind of an illustrative comment on that. This was a focus group comment. And basically she says, we haven't heard anything from our school at all, and it raises a lot of concerns. And she goes on to compare it to social media and kind of how that got away from us in terms of our ability to sort of stay on top of how it would be used and and how we're going to approach it. So what this one was then just asking how comfortable parents would be with their children using AI in each of the following I'm sorry, how comfortable parents would be with their children's teachers using AI in each of the following ways. And on this one, we found a lot of somewhat comfortables. There's not too many out in the not to or not at all, but there's a lot of variation in what parents would say that they would be comfortable with and how comfortable they say they would be. So the item where parents were the most comfortable was providing support to multilingual learners, providing extra help to students with disabilities or individual needs, completing administrative tasks, and so forth. But then when you get down to the bottom on tutoring, feedback, grading, those items parents were less comfortable with than they were with some of the other items. Then a couple comments from focus groups, and like I said, these will be posted on the MPG website, so you don't have to speed read through all of them. But you can just to grab a couple, you can see that the top one is it's concerning because parents will rely on AI instead of using their own problem-solving skills. I think the feedback one is a big one for me. Feedback coming from machines is going to be pretty objective, and sometimes you don't take all criticism equally well. So there's a parent with a bit more of a nuanced view. So definitely log on, take a look at these and some of the other open-ended information on our website. So this one then dug into some of the concerns about AI, that it would give some students an unfair advantage, that there'd be unequal access, that children's data would potentially be collected or leading to privacy issues, or that there would be biased evaluations. And we found that overall, it was a pretty significant majority were either very concerned or somewhat concerned about each one of these items. So overall, for just starting from the left, some students would have an unfair advantage. You see 73% there, 71% for unequal access to AI, and so forth. So pretty large majorities in each case. And men were a bit less likely to say that they were concerned about these than were women, again, following the trend that we've seen emerging throughout the survey. So this one then was asking how much input parents actually wanted. So the survey again was among parents. So how much input you, the respondent, the parent would want into decisions about whether and how AI tools are used in schools. And you can see that there's kind of a range of views on this. If you kind of add up some of the buckets, I think that's probably the best way to look at it. And you can see that if you just look at these two are either that parents should be the deciding factor or that they should actively participate in the school's decisions. Those two together are 46%. And then another quarter or so said that parents should at least be consulted. So I think what this adds up to is that parents at least want to have input. And when you combine that with the number who say that they just don't know what exists already, I think there's an information gap between what parents understand is happening, what parents think the policy is, how parents think AI is being used, and so forth and so on. So definitely opportunities for additional communication. And then this question was about whether schools should require students to complete a digital literacy course. And I'd say that there's pretty broad majorities saying that yes, they thought that they should be required to do a digital literacy course. About 2/3 said yes. Men were a bit more likely to say so, again, as were parents with a college degree or more, and parents in higher income brackets also more likely to say that that should be a requirement. And then one final question was just about general levels of computer assignments, whether parents think that their children are getting too many assignments, too few, or about the right amount of work on a computer. And you can see that not that many think it's too many, not that many parents think it's too many right now. Just 20% say that they think that their children are getting too many assignments, compared to 50% who say about the right amount, 8% not enough, and then the rest kind of distributed between either none or they just don't know at this point. You can see that here too, women were more likely to say too many than were men. And those with less than a BA and parents actually of older children were also more likely to say that they thought there were too many computer assignments at this point. So I know I've gone through that very quickly, but would highly recommend going to the website and downloading some more of the materials. But for now, I'm going to turn it back over to Jenny to continue our program.
Thank you, Steve. Clearly, there's a lot to unpack in this data. And I think it sets the stage for a really important conversation about what comes next for Massachusetts. Before we turn it over to our panel discussion, we wanted to first take a moment to really ground ourselves in the statewide landscape and really understand what is the Commonwealth already doing, how guidance is evolving, and what kind of supports districts can expect as AI and emerging technologies continue to reshape teaching and learning. And so, with that, it is my privilege to introduce our guest speaker, Andrea or AJ Cote, who is the Assistant Director of EdTech at the Massachusetts Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. AJ is a results-driven leader with more than 25 years of experience across K through 12 leadership, information technology, and state education systems. And she brings a deep commitment to using technology in ways that are accessible, engaging, and equitable for all students. And most recently, AJ actually played a central role in helping to shape DESE's emerging guidance on AI and collaborating with district leaders across Massachusetts and partners nationwide to really help schools navigate both the opportunities and the challenges of this rapidly evolving space. So AJ, thank you so much for being with us today and for offering to share your perspectives and insights with the group. I'll now turn the mic over to you.
Thanks, Jenny, and thank you so much for having me. Steve is a hard one to follow because he was precisely on for the timing, that our windows of time. So, Steve, hard act to follow there. I am AJ Cote. It is nice to meet you. I am the Assistant Director of Ed Tech here at the department. And I do want to give you a little bit of an understanding of our roadmap, but I'm going to use an analogy that many people are using around AI. And it goes back to Steve Jobs from Apple. So back in the 1980s, Steve Jobs said that the computer is a bicycle for the mind. And fast forward to today, and you can think of generative AI as the e-bike. And so it's the same basic frame, but with a motor that really boosts speed and distance. And so whether we're talking about a motorized bicycle or the advent of a new technology, what we agree on is the need for a safe and purposeful roadmap to integrate its use into our lives. And so our path at the department started down this road with one question: how might DESE support schools and districts as they address the opportunities and challenges presented by AI? And so who better to tell us about that than the people who are in schools and districts? And so we established a task force during the school year of 2024 with the help and a process completely led and helped and guided by Dr. Tara Natras that you're going to meet in a little bit. The task force provided recommendations to the department. And so these were individuals from all across the state, all different roles, all different school types. And they whittled down all of their recommendations into these 8 actions across these 3 primary categories: resource creation and curation, professional development, and policy supports. And so we at the department took their recommendations and their report, which is all online, and put together our roadmap. And we said, let's do what we can right away with resource creation. And so we went across the top bullets you see there for AI literacy to bolster some professional learning opportunities and then create some sample, the guidelines and policies documents. This year, we've been continuing with implementation supports. And so going back to our bike example from a second ago, you can think of our resources as the policy and guidance resource as kind of like the owner's manual, rules of the road. Where can I use this e-bike? Are there lanes? How should it operate? And the AI literacy materials as kind of the rider safety course. Like, how do I operate this in the best, most effective, safest way. And so when you see the guidance, all of these things on the left side of the screen are resources and supplemental resources that go with our policy guidance. And so the policy guidance and supplemental resources themselves were developed in collaboration with ISTE and ASCD and Dr. Tara Natras, and were developed for school and district administrators so that they could help carefully navigate their own course for AI guidance or policy in their own district, kind of the where, when, how, and if they needed to adjust their current policies to include this emerging technology. Whereas the AI literacy or the kind of rider safety course information is where we have the AI literacy modules and supplemental resources designed for K-12 educators to help them develop a foundational understanding of generative AI through self-paced online course that prompts them to think about how they can implement AI safely and with intention. So the policy guidance itself is built upon 5 ethical principles of AI use. And we do this because making decisions about AI use in our schools and districts needs a common foundation. And so these principles reflect our commitment to public education that fosters equity, transparency, trust, and human dignity. So if we look at some of these 5 principles that you see at the bottom of the screen, and we go through and look at data privacy and security, we're saying districts should adopt a principle where AI use complies with all relevant laws, policies related to student data, like FERPA, like COPPA. And so if this were my e-bike example, you would want to make sure that you're using only a vetted e-bike that the school has vetted, that has agreed that they're not selling their rider data to any third parties. And many of the districts are part of the Student Data Privacy Consortium. We have the transparency aspect that Steve was just talking about, where we believe educators, students, and families should know when AI is involved in learning, grading, decision-making, or access to services. Bias awareness and mitigation is woven through this policy document as well, where we're saying all AI tools need to be critically examined for embedded bias. Again, with my bike example, you wouldn't want to be driving an e-bike that was only tested on a flat, dry walkway and then have to drive it on a wet, steep, rocky terrain. It might lean to the left or lean to the right, and so that bias may be embedded. So again, human oversight, and I cannot overstate this one enough. AI should only support but never replace educators. Teachers are always going to provide the context, empathy, and moral reasoning that machines cannot replicate. And so think of this one as the driver's always in control. A bike will not know if there's a pothole in front of you. And so that brings us to academic integrity, where we are saying loudly that AI should be used in ways that reinforce learning, not short-circuit it. And so in this case, let's think about the fact that you are trying to get stronger and healthier, and then you decide to use the e-bike motor 100% of the time. You might get to your destination, but you're not going to get any stronger and you're not going to get any healthier. You've reached the goal, but you've missed the point of the exercise. So this is where we need to help our students know when to use AI for the uphill parts of a lesson and when they actually need to be doing the heavy pedaling. And so the policy guidance provides the foundation and the main domains of the AI use, which then allows us the opportunity to talk more about how to do those things effectively and safely based on principles of AI literacy. And so one of the definitions we use to talk about AI literacy is from Teach AI, really based on the technical knowledge, durable skills, future-ready attitudes around AI so that learners can engage, create, manage, and design with AI while critically evaluating benefits, risks, and ethical implications. And so this is the idea here is that we don't need to know how to build a bike, but it's really helpful to understand how the pedals work, so that you can actually continue to effectively use and produce with whatever it is you're using. For example, we don't need teachers to be software engineers under that first grasp the fundamentals icon. We don't need them to be software engineers, but we do need them to know how AI works, what AI is, so that they can make informed decisions about its use. And these sections of the AI literacy resource will help them develop those skills. And so with all of our resources and implementation supports, our message is clear. And I am going to read this quote for everyone. Our vision for education and AI considerations cannot be separated. AI is not a standalone initiative. It cuts across instruction and assessment, operations and communication. It changes how students engage with content, how teachers design learning, and how systems make decisions. Leading through AI requires not just understanding the tools, but managing the shifts they bring. It is a change management challenge as much as a technical and instructional one. And so as we manage this transition, we want our district staff and students to confidently know and understand the rules of the road, to understand the mechanics of their equipment, but to always have their hands on the handlebars or on the brakes. And honestly, we are ultimately looking to build future-ready skills for our district staff and students so that they can always chart their own course, whether it's with an e-bike, whether it's with generative AI, or whether it's with the next emerging technology. Thank you.
Thank you so much, AJ, for that really thoughtful overview of the state's work and the broader landscape we're facing when it comes to AI in schools. And I'll just say I'm a huge fan of analogies, and so I think I especially appreciated your bike analogy to really help frame the conversation, and clearly illustrate both the benefits and the risks when it comes to AI use in schools. And so between the poll findings and the statewide perspectives you've shared, I think it's clear that there's a lot for us to discuss, both in terms of what families are experiencing and how the state is responding. And so to help us dig deeper into some of these themes, we're now going to turn it over to our panel discussion. And just as a quick reminder that you can submit questions for our panelists or for AJ or for Steve at any point using the Q&A function, and we're going to be sure to address them at the end of the session. It is now my pleasure to introduce my colleague Shanti Lopes, who is the Director of Engagement and Communications at EdTrust in Massachusetts. Shanti has led our parent polling work for many years now, and we are thrilled to have her guide today's panel conversation. Shanti, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much for the warm welcome, Jenny, and hello to everyone. Really excited for today's conversation, especially excited to hear from all our panelists who are going to really share their reactions and thoughts based on today's poll findings, as well as give us some insights on the work that they have done when it comes to AI and what they're hearing on the ground. So really excited to have our panel introduce themselves, if they can come on screen and briefly introduce themselves, their role, and anything that they would like the audience today to know about themselves. I will start off with Carrie.
Hey everybody, my name is Carrie Rodriguez. I'm the president of the National Parents Union. We are part of the Teach AI Steering Committee, the EdSafe AI Task Force, and the Brookings Global Task Force on AI, which is part of the UN Secretary General's Education First Technical Advisory Group. But the most important title that I have is being Matthew, Miles, and David's mom. I live here in Woburn, Massachusetts. I have those three plus two bonus sons. So we are right in the mix with kids who are 12 to 18. So very excited to be a part of this conversation with all of you.
Thank you so much, Carrie. I always love how you include that your children in your role. Very important role. I'm going to stop next. Go with you, Dr. Veda.
Hi, everyone. Good morning, and thank you for being here, and thank you for having me. I'm Dr. Beta, and I am the proud superintendent of Chelsea Public Schools, and just excited to share what we're doing in Chelsea. And again, thank you for having me.
Of course, really excited to dig into what's going on in Chelsea in a little bit. And last with you, Dr. Natras.
Hi, everyone. I am excited to be here as part of the conversation today. I am Dr. Tara Natras, and I am a Chief Innovation Strategist at Lenovo and support schools and districts and departments of education across the country on really reimagining what education might look like for our students, really building more flexible and adaptable environments. And a lot of the work that I have been doing is Carrie shared. We share opportunities to work together with Teach AI and the EdSafe AI Alliance and several other organizations as we are working with educators to help really think through what AI implementation looks like within all of our classrooms. And I am also navigating this space with our 7-year-old. So Carrie, just like you, right, figuring this out both as a parent and as well as an educator.
Thank you all for giving a little bit of insight into who you are and how your insights will really help inform today's conversation. So there was so much to unpack when it came to the poll findings. I think we're going to have the opportunity to dig a little bit deeper into some of the specific points, but just want to start off with general reactions, right? Based on everything that you've heard from the poll data, want to really know, was there anything that stood out, whether surprising or something that really was new. So I'm going to start with you, Carrie. So after listening to the poll results, what stood out the most to you? Was there anything that was completely surprising? Anything that, based on the work that you have done here in Massachusetts, I know you've also done it nationally, that was either the same or different?
Yeah, I think we see a lot of similar findings nationally. Our organization is about 1,800 groups in all 50 states, DC and Puerto Rico, and Massachusetts parents are really just in alignment with what we're seeing nationally. And that is excitement, nervousness, a little confusion about AI, definitely seeing it as an opportunity, wanting our kids to be prepared, obviously, for what the jobs and economy of the future is going to look like, and really wanting to make sure that our kids are taking advantage of those opportunities right now. But at the same time, we can't participate in what we don't know. And there is a nervousness around, what is AI? How is my child being exposed to it? It sounds wonderful. It sounds like the age of opportunity, but there are also some really important caveats and guardrails that need to be put up to make sure that this is a safe experience for our kid. And so when we take a look, I want to say, like, it makes sense to me that a third of parents are excited because, about a third of parents know a little bit more about AI and what it looks like. A third of parents saying, whoa, I've heard a lot of crazy stuff about it. I'm not sure if this is safe for our kids. And a third saying, what, we just don't know enough and we've got to know more. What really stood out to me the most is how many parents are lacking communication from their classroom teachers, from their schools, from their districts, about how their kids are being exposed to AI, what's going on in the classroom, what are the rules. And so when you take that and you line it up with the fact that a lot of parents are nervous about cheating and what does this mean, it's, we can't react to things that we don't know, and we can't protect our kids from things that we don't know. We can't encourage them, to engage with things that we don't know. So to me, it's kind of this fundamental problem that we deal with, not just in AI, but with a whole host of things when it comes to parents and families and communities. And that's the need for communication and that need for open dialogue and transparency with parents around what my kid is being exposed to every single day.
Thank you so much, Carrie. And I'm actually going to take a lot of what you shared and which was a key finding from the poll, this sort of mixed feelings from parents. And as well as I think you added a little bit more of what you're hearing on the ground, sort of the need for greater communication. Just wondering from you, Dr. Beta, does this sort of align as a district leader from what you're hearing from parents directly on the ground? Or did some of the sort of the findings or that one in particular sort of challenge your assumptions or what you're hearing more day to day?
Actually, I agree completely with Carrie. There is definitely mixed feelings. And I think our goal, my goal as superintendent and our educators is we really are grappling a lot with this as well. We're, I don't think we are are experts. And so what we're doing is as a system, we are taking advantage of what DESE has to offer. And I had all of our teachers take the training that DESE offered about several months ago and get certified in AI because our educators also need professional development because like the questions we get is how are we using this in the classroom? Um, should we allow students to use generative AI in the classroom? And so those are things that this is all new for us too as educators. Now, what to Carrie's point, one thing that we do have is an AI task force, and it has central office administrators, teachers, and parents. But one thing I'm thinking about is how do I engage more parents in this task force? DESE has done a phenomenal job of outlining opportunities for us to learn, for educators to learn and take advantage of. And I like right now, I formed the task force because we don't have a policy. And we were waiting for some guidance and now we have it. And so that's why that task force is in place. So there's a lot of work that we have to do to engage our community. And it's also engaging our educators with what are the guardrails, how can AI be used to support rather than supplant? And then how can we make sure that our families are aware and DESE has put out some wonderful tools.
Thank you. I think really important for us to hear what's happening on the ground, and really promising to hear that both that guidance exists and that there's a large amount of teachers that are taking advantage of that opportunity. Dr. Natras, I want to go on to you as I think you sort of shared. We know that there's a lot of work that you're doing across the state in Massachusetts, across the country, internationally. So just curious, how do you interpret some of the divides that we are seeing? I think specifically when it comes to gender, age, income, as well as level of education. And then I also want to sort of piggyback on that question, optimism as well. We saw in particular with multilingual learners, parents of with students who are multilingual learners were especially optimistic about AIs. Do you have any insights that you can offer as to maybe why, or what are you hearing as some potential reasons? And then what might be overall, in your opinion, driving some of the incitement as well as the hesitations?
So I think that theme of learning that we've heard from our other two panelists as well is one that resonates. We are all still learning about what is happening with AI. We've actually had AI in our classrooms for close to a decade, but more of the predictive and adaptive AI tools. And what has shifted this conversation is the release of generative AI and the accessibility of generative AI to our global community, right? Everyone who has a device and internet access now has access to generative AI tools. And I think if we take a step back from the education space and look at it more broadly, it really is impacting not only the education space, but the ways in which we live, the ways in which we work. And we're trying to figure that out. And so I think some of the divides that we are seeing and the differences that we're seeing in some of the poll results really have to do with our experiences with these tools, the conversations that we're having about them, our depth of knowledge about them. Am I using them within my own work? And am I having success with them in my own work? And that then translates into, well, if I'm having success as a parent using these tools within my workspace, then of course I want my students and my kids to have the exposure to it so they can have that same level of success. And so I think depending on those experiences, those conversations, that is driving some of our feelings, both the positive feelings and the negative and hesitations that we're seeing as we think about what this looks like. And part of what plays into that is the complexity. When we say AI, everyone has a very different thought as to what that means. And there is a complexity to it. There are lots of elements to AI, whether we're using it to translate text, which I think probably plays into the seeing more positive results from some of our multilingual learner families, because they can now access content and access resources in ways that they were not able to do before. And so that's a positive experience with AI. If I have seen issues with students or others creating deep fakes, and that is causing a challenge for me or my family or my kids' friends, I'm going to have a negative response to that, right? So a lot of this comes down to the how have I personally engaged with this? What is my depth of knowledge, and how am I translating that into classrooms? Am I seeing positives or am I seeing negatives within those tools? And I think when we see excitement, going back to so where are the positives here? We're seeing the use cases that really help us support learning in new and different ways and help disrupt some of the models of schooling that haven't always provided for the needs of all of our students. And we can use AI to do things like provide more accessible learning opportunities, create a shift to more authentic assessments. And it's really pushing us to go beyond the technology conversation and really into what is the purpose of school and what are the things that we really want to focus on. So I guess my theme is we're all still learning and it's really complex. And because of that, we're going to see a distribution of responses from folks.
Thank you so much for those insights. I also saw that while you were sharing, there was a lot of head nodding. So just curious, and if not, we can go on to the next question. If there was sort of any reactions or thoughts, specifically when it came, I know I mentioned that parents of students who are multilingual learners were especially optimistic, but we also saw that men were more than women. So just curious if there was any insights or any thoughts that you all wanted to share when it came to why some are more optimistic than other, and what could potentially be driving some of the hesitation. Was just curious if there's anything. Carrie, I see you were one of the
I was chomping at the bit because I know there are very real examples of how this has positively benefited, especially our English language learning community, and that is through interpretation and translation. And that is not only in the special education community, but also in generally matriculating students. It has changed the balance of power for parents who actively want to be participants in conversations with educators, but there's this balance of power that is off when there is a language issue. And too often it is very difficult for parents and families to access interpretation in those meetings where they want to really be a part of the educational team to help their children, but they're misunderstood, they're misunderstanding, and this is really transformational for them. And I've seen this in real time. Now, would I advise parents to start uploading their IEP documents into ChatGPT? No, because obviously you're uploading information, you're not controlling where that information goes. All of that can be of concern. But I have seen other tools being developed that are really just changing the game for parents being able to have that real-time communication with educators, which is really what we want. Now, at the same time, the guardrails are important. I have heard and seen directly from parents and families who are deeply concerned about how AI chatbots are being utilized in classroom conversations. So, for instance, working with a group of parents in New York City public schools, they were telling us directly, very concerned to have pre-K and kindergarten kids coming home with access to an AI chatbot that was telling them, you can tell me anything. And that was really unsettling for them, especially around a new usage of a tool that they had not consented to. And again, we as parents seeing that, we're teaching our kids things like stranger danger, like don't talk to people you don't know, don't volunteer this information, don't interact with people in real time. And so we have that same deep concern, and it's well-founded because frankly, we can see how much information our children are volunteering to these AI sources. We don't have control of that information and how it's being utilized. And frankly, we don't have assurances that if our children do volunteer information that could be concerning and something we need to know about, that we're going to be told that information. So again, this is where the communication, the partnership with parents and families are really important. And finally, consent. Which is critically important in all of this. Our children are not guinea pigs in this experiment, and it's really important that we take the guidance of DESE and other policymakers and experts that are trying to help education systems figure this stuff out, because we do want those guardrails around information sharing, around security, to make sure that our kids are protected. And there's a whole world of things that we could talk about there, but those are just two real-time examples of how this really hits parents directly.
Thank you, Carrie. Definitely appreciate that real example and additional context. I think I have a follow-up question for you, which fit very nicely with what you just shared. So knowing what you just told us, knowing that the majority of parents express reservations about AI, specifically when it comes to equity, privacy, bias, what strategies, in your opinion, could district use to really build that trust between families as they continue to integrate AI into student learning?
Again, I go back to transparency and, informing parents and consent. At the beginning of the year, I'll even bring this to a real-time example in my house. I was getting the traditional packet that we get sent home every single year about consenting to pictures and, can your child get Tylenol at school? Who's the emergency contact? And there's that traditional document that we get, consenting to technology use. And I'm taking a look, and I'm not going to out the district in particular. My kids actually, I live in Woburn, but my kids attend different districts. But I'm going to say the document I was presented from the school was referring to like AOL Instant Messenger, like very antiquated document that didn't cover AI usage. And me knowing that my child is actually utilizing a Chromebook with access to Google Classroom that has now added 50 integrated tools this year alone that are AI infused into that application. I didn't see any reference as to whether or not I consented to my child being exposed to that tool and consent for me, knowing where that information was going to go, how my kid was going to be exposed, et cetera. So again, DESE is trying, and I appreciate their efforts in trying to guide districts toward wanting to get that consent, get that information from parents and families, because I will tell you the alternative to this. We can see that unfortunately in this day and age where there are wonderful things happening to AI, there are some kids who are actually being actively harmed by AI. And we're in the process of trying to regulate that to protect them on the federal level and on the state level to make sure that they are protected. But we're not there yet. So doing this without the consent of parents, without the knowledge of parents, leaves you really at risk in this moment, because you do have a duty of care to take care of these kids that are being exposed to these technologies in the classroom.
Thank you for sharing. I think really important that you gave sort of not things like a real concrete example of what could be done. Curious if any of the other panelists have any insights into the strategy that Carrie proposed, or generally speaking, if you have any other thoughts or opinion that you would like to build off of what strategies could be used.
Sure. Carrie, I want to thank you. I was taking notes as you were talking, and one of the notes was update our technology consent form to include AI, because we haven't done that yet. And I do think that is very important, because our kids are being exposed to so much alone just with Google Classroom. I was thinking about how we're using AI to teach literacy, and I have Ignite Reading, and of course we have all of the guardrails with Ignite Reading, but it's adaptive. It's an adaptive program with an individual tutor, a person that tutors our kids. And this is all for our first graders. and that's AI, and it's extremely beneficial. We're seeing our students gain 5 months, 5.9 months of instruction on this tool. And so again, it's making sure that our families are aware of this. And when you talk to our families, they're very familiar with Ignite Reading because we made sure that they know about it. Another app that I was very hesitant to take on, but my lead for social work was like, Ami, it's okay. And I asked a million and one questions before I agreed to use it. It's called Alongside app, and it's an app that's on a student phone, and it's for tier one, tier two social emotional uh, support. So if a student is feeling sad, the little Yama says, "Oh, why are why are you feeling sad or anxious?" And then and I was like, I remember telling my social emotional lead, uh, I was like, am I going to be on all weekend long with this Yama and Alongside app? I'm a little scared because we all as educators need time. Like we can't, like, what if there's an emergency over the weekend and how do we address this? And so we figured out a way to kind of like if it's a serious emergency and a student is using it over the weekend, then it pings us, and then we know. But I was hesitant to use it, and it's all AI generated. And what we're finding is our counselors are saying, well, we're not dealing with as much as the little issues right now. And there's research that's showing that students who are using the Alongside app, um, they have better attendance. And so I was super cautious about all of this when we rolled it out because it is something like I'm like, is this a chat box? I don't want them doing this. And so there's definite guardrails. But again, I cautious, but also using it for support. Another thing, just from my I have a daughter, she's I hate to say it, she's 26 years old. And when she was young, um, I used to teach kindergarten. She was struggling with spelling. And I knew as an educator something was going on, but I didn't know what. I got her tested for and she didn't qualify. Then come ninth grade in high school, she was really struggling still with her spelling. And I was like, something's not right. I'm going to have her get evaluated again. And then I spoke to one of my professors who was the leading professor in special education at one of them. And he said, Ami, is she comprehending? And I was like, yeah. And he goes, well, that's what all these programs are for. Don't worry about her spelling. Now she's 26 years old working in a lab at MIT, and she uses Grammarly. And she's like, Mom, I can't spell, but I have Grammarly now. We're not going to worry about it. And it's like that tool has helped my daughter tremendously. And so as a parent, I would really stress out because I was like, oh my gosh, how's my daughter gonna, function in the professional setting? And she's doing great. So there's definitely a lot of pros, but at the same time, um, the reason why I hadn't just put out a policy is because I was waiting for guidance from the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, and I wanted to be inclusive of our policies as well. So we're in the midst of developing that. But again, there's gotta be some guardrails. I am concerned about the chat box. I am concerned about students being more and more isolated and not socializing with each other. So those are some serious concerns that I have as well as an educator.
And as we think through what this looks like, and we talk about the guardrails and we talk about privacy and security, we also need to be considering who is using the AI tools and for what purpose. Because as I said earlier, when we talk about AI, everyone has a different mental model, and we tend to lump a whole lot of things into it. And when we talk about AI in education, we're sometimes talking against one another or across one another, or not really talking about the same things. And so as districts are looking at this work, they're also really thinking about when am I using these tools as an educator solely for educator tasks? If I am using them to do things like create rubrics or to help with discussion questions or to help modify a text and adapt it to a different reading level or whatever that might be, the opportunities and risks are very different than bringing the tools into the classroom where students are then using them. And so I think we have to be really clear as we are thinking about AI in education and what the use cases are and what the tasks are as we then think about how we respond. Because we need guidance and policy for both of those buckets, as well as for teaching AI literacy really explicitly. And we also need professional learning for both of those things. And when we engage in the professional learning, talking about the privacy and security implications. So, Carrie, not only parents, but also teachers know not to take that IEP and upload it to a tool, right, to help with goals or other things. But also really thinking about any harmful bias that may come out of them, the use of AI tools, particularly AI companions. And are we having conversations with our kids about that as part of the digital literacy conversation? And then also really thinking about what are the implications for curriculum and instruction and the resources being used. So yes, we've had tools like iReady and Dreambox and other adaptive AI tools that collect data on our students, but it's a very different type of data collection than some of the newer AI tools and chatbots that we're seeing in schools. And so are we asking the questions as to what data is being collected? Who has access to that data? Where is that data being housed so that we can really focus on the privacy and security implications? The one other piece that I'll pull out, and Carrie, you brought this up with the kindergarten and first graders, is that schools and districts are really thinking through what is happening at particular grade levels. We know we need to build AI literacy for all of our students K-12 across content areas. What that looks like, however, in elementary school versus middle school versus high school is going to be very different. I can teach AI literacy using a lot of offline activities and things so that elementary students understand some of the concepts of AI without ever getting onto an AI tool, right? I can teach those things in a lot of different ways. And there are lots of lessons out there from Teach AI and code.org and others that allow for that. And then as I'm getting into middle and high school, am I teaching the ways in which AI is being used in industry to support our students as they go into college and career? It isn't just about a chatbot. It's about how are these tools being used to support drug development and aviation and marketing and communications to amplify the work that's happening. So I'm seeing districts think about that guidance and policy lens, the building it into professional learning, and also then really thinking about if we're using these tools at what grade levels and what's happening with the data.
Thank you so much. That was actually the question that I had for you, really, when it comes to, there's a lot of ideas and thoughts, and I think this conversation has really raised a lot about the exciting opportunities as AI continues to evolve, some of the real challenges, the need for more communications, the need for more safe guardrails for policy. But I think you really was helpful for you to sort of ground us in some of the ways that you're seeing that and to really think about how do we do that in a meaningful way. I want to pivot us. There's a lot of questions in the Q&A that actually align with some of the questions that I had for the rest of the conversation. But for this portion, I'm actually going to ask Steve and Andrea to come back on the screen, and then I'm going to get started with some of the audience Q&A. So the first question, which I wanted to ask you a question specifically after Dr. Nattrass, you mentioned digital literacy, which was a big question in the poll. So there was a question from the audience for everyone. Anyone that feels inclined to answer, please feel free to come off mute. So the question is, how should digital literacy be implemented if required? Is it a skill that is integrated in the existing core curriculum, or should it be separate content area of both? Is digital literacy being addressed in the current deliberations of the Governor's Statewide Graduation Council? So anyone that wants to offer any insights or thoughts, perspective.
I can jump into this one. Massachusetts has had digital literacy and computer science standards since 2015, 2016. And so those they're available on our website. And I'll drop the link in the chat in a little bit. But those are, they can be, like Tara was mentioning, they can actually be infused into the existing content curriculum, or they could be standalone classes. And so it really depends on how an individual district is implementing those. And as for the question around the Governor's Statewide Graduation Council, I do not believe that digital literacy specifically has been addressed yet, but I do encourage people to raise that if they're concerned. I know that there are going to be stakeholder outreach sessions going on, so please feel free.
Shanti, if I can jump into this one as
Of
well.
course.
I think it's both. I think there needs to be integration and a standalone class that is taught around digital literacy for a couple of different reasons. Whether we like it or not, we are thrusting our kids into a digital society. And to hold them back and to have our heads in the sand in this moment in 2026 is to throw them into the deep end of the pool without any swimming lessons, without any help at all. And that is just frightening to think about in this day and age. I think it's critically important, not just because we want kids to be critical learners and critical thinkers, because it's important to our democracy. And frankly, like it would be irresponsible to have this conversation without considering the larger context of what we're facing in this country right now. We need our kids to be critical thinkers. We need our kids to question and to not believe everything that they see in front of them. And that goes to also how we work with educators around how they utilize these tools to free them up from a lot of administrative tasks and give them that extra time that we want them to have, so that we are actually encouraging them to build soft skills like communication, teamwork, and collaboration, but problem solving and critical thinking, to not just automatically accept everything that they are getting from these AI tools. Because when we think about it, we have to acknowledge the fact that AI is built to be reaffirming of what the user is asking of it and what it's receiving back. And so it is critical that our educators teach our kids that you don't believe everything that you're fed on a screen, that you need to challenge it with your own brain and know how to see both sides of things. So I get very excited when we talk about the digital literacy piece, because it is so comprehensive and so critically important, not just, because we want to build kids that are prepared for the jobs and economy of the future. It's also critically important to our democracy. And frankly, we can see that playing out right now in real time.
Thank you. As you mentioned, critically important, I think, given that 2/3 of parents agree that it should be required, also agree with you that it's important. I think you brought up sort of it's here, we sort of can't avoid it. But sort of course, as this conversation has shone a light on the importance of addressing some of those real challenges. One of the questions that was a follow-up from the audience from all was around, what about teachers who are sort of already in the classroom, have looked at the guidance and the research, and are sort of in the mindset of AI has no place in my classroom? Is it going to be forced upon them, or what do you think should be some of the next steps, is the question. For anyone that it was for anyone, or specifically, I think it was for AJ, but anyone that wants to answer.
I'm happy to answer, but I wanted to see, Almi, if you wanted to jump in there too.
Sure. I mean, I think, again, if I can see why some teachers may be hesitant, I can see that 100%. And I think that's again goes to why providing professional development for our educators is so important. And what is AI, and what are the guardrails? Because there is a lot of hesitancy, and that's part of the reason why we have certain amount of time for professional development throughout the year, and we set aside several hours for everyone to go through the DESE course and our entire staff, because we wanted our educators to have that knowledge and not be afraid of AI, but to also learn about it. Because again, a lot of people, including myself, we're all learning. And so what does this look like in the classroom? And how do we make sure that we're being wise and cautious? But then that at the same time, I'm in a district where 87% of my students are Latino, 57% are multilingual learners. I don't want my students to get left behind. It is an issue of equity for me. And I want my kids to have access, but I also want to make sure that we're giving them healthy access and safety in that access. So that's very important to me.
Thank you
Thanks,
so
Elmi.
much.
I think too, the question for me has to do with how these tools are being used. And so I always go back to, I've been in ed tech for almost 30 years, and I would tell you that it's never about the tool itself. It's about the learning. So what is it that we want to use these tools to accomplish? What is it? Is there an intent for this lesson, and what is the vision for our district's educational outcomes, and is this going to help us get there or not? And so when we're talking more about whether or not individual teachers are going to be, I think the word was forced in the question, this comes down to individual districts and how individual districts are addressing their strategic plan and their vision for teaching and learning, and how they're looking at how educational technology is being woven through the day and the year in service of those educational outcomes.
Yeah. And AJ, I think it also has to do with what we were saying earlier about the different types of AI and the different use cases of AI, right? Like forcing, as said in the question, someone to use a generative AI tool simply to have students engage in a way that doesn't align with their purpose, like you're talking about, doesn't make sense. We all agree with that. I think there are also opportunities to learn more, as I talked about earlier, about how these tools are being used in industry. So I recently had a woman from biotech speak to a team of biology and chemistry teachers about how AI is being used in data analysis and drug development. And the bio and chem teacher said, oh, we need to revamp some of the ways in which we're teaching our content areas to align. And it wasn't about a chatbot, it was about how these tools are being used for data analysis and for all kinds of things that I can't yet wrap my brain around, to do things like drug development. And we have to help our teachers understand that it goes beyond some of the conversations that we've been having about large language models and into the what does this mean for the world of work moving forward? And how do I bring that into my content areas where it makes sense to do so? And I think that's the other piece of this, is that complexity of AI and understanding those different elements as we talk about what it looks like in the classroom.
Yeah, I have a question. It was for everyone. It says, sort of building off of sort of the opportunities and what that looks like. Somebody asked, I recognize that AI is now unavoidable part of the classroom, but what safeguards are in place to ensure its reasonable use? Do these protections differ by age group, elementary, middle school, and high school? As we watch AI reshape how students learn in real time, how do we make sure the core foundations of education, writing, reading, math, critical thinking, and civic understanding remain intact? And that's for anyone that wants to answer.
Yeah, I'm going to jump into this one because I'm also seeing some other questions in the chat. I'm not going to answer them directly, but the idea that we have districts right now that are utilizing and experimenting with hundreds of tools at the same time is mind-boggling, because how can you like actually do a thorough assessment of whether or not this tool is right for your kids, how it's going to be utilized, what are the protections, is it worth it? There are so many people flooding the market right now with ideas because there's so much money around ed tech and AI. So there are so many people that are literally flooding our educators and superintendents. I mean, Ami, you must get calls. Your phone must be ringing off the hook with so many people saying, I've got this new tool, I've got this new idea, let me bring it into your kids. And we can't be moving at that pace. We're talking about what we're exposing our children to. So I think fundamentally we've got to put the brakes on for a minute and say, what is our process by which we are going to allow our children to be exposed to this tool? What are we getting out of it? What are they getting out of it? Who's controlling the data? Just because it's available does not mean you have to use it, and there has to be a process. And that comes into, again, engagement with educators, engagement with parents and community to make sure that we are first doing no harm to our kids, while we are tremendously excited about the opportunity that this wonderful technology presents all of us. Again, like the purpose of all of this is supposed to be making sure our kids are prepared, making sure they are good. So if we center them in all things before we get excited about this stuff, I think we're going to make better decisions. But oh my goodness, hundreds of applications. Like that's not the way to approach this stuff. It's overwhelming just to think about it. Think about being a 7-8-year-old kid being exposed to all of these different things at all times. I know as a parent, just the idea, again, having 5 kids, I'm being told you got to be on this app and this app and this, like it is like drinking from a fire hydrant. I can't imagine being a kid having to navigate all this stuff at the same time too.
Yeah.
Thank you, Karen. I actually have a great follow-up question to what you just mentioned, but curious if anyone else has, before I ask that question, any additional context or insights that they would like to share.
Yeah, I would love to share a little bit. I think, Carrie, to your point, I get emails a lot. There are a lot of startup companies new, and we vet everything because again, it's like we're not just going to give you our student data. I mean, we're very cautious about that. And then the whole point of we want AI to support and not replace, and it's so important that we're teaching our students critical skills. And when you get something from AI, is it the truth? Is it biased? And those are all the things that we want to make sure we're teaching our students to look at things critically. And that's going to be something that we have to be very, very mindful of, because we want our students to think. We want them to create their own ideas. We want them to be able to say, is this truth or not? And is there bias in this? Because we know for a fact that some AIs are there's biases. And so it's like we just have to be really careful. But at the end of the day, for me, I do feel like we're living in this world. We have to expose our students, but we got to be careful. We have to have guardrails. And I definitely don't want my students getting left behind, but I also want to make sure that I'm protecting them too.
Yeah, I just want to jump on that really quickly to you had asked, I think the initial question was around guardrails. And I just want to reiterate for folks, there are guardrails. There are guardrails around age appropriateness and around different software and the age restrictions of that software. Districts have educational technology or instructional technology departments. Some call them digital learning. Each district is different in what they'll call that department. Many of the districts, I'll drop it in the chat, are part of the Student Data Privacy Alliance, where there are data privacy agreements in place with these companies. They have these documents on file that shows where the data is, where it does not go or where it does go, and it has to meet a whole process to be included in that. But I also want to go back to the guardrails around our administrators and our educators, because they are the professionals. They are the ones who are with our students all day, every day. Their number one priority, more often than not, is the safety and security of all of the children. They are also learning this new technology, as we all are. And so I just want to go back to the fact that these are individuals who woke up one morning and AI showed up. And so we all, in different aspects, showed up, and it was just like, oh, Grammarly looks different today, or this ChatGPT is now available and I can try it. For educators, that showed up in their classroom. And so they are responsible for all of the little people in front of them and the safety of that. So while they are navigating a new and emerging technology, they are doing so with classroom management, with heavy numbers of students in front of them, with 7 other initiatives and early literacy, and Almi's laughing because she knows. But I think that we also have to provide our professionals a little bit of grace as well, in that they're navigating something very new that everyone is navigating right now. And so there are no best practices because this is all developing day by day. You can go to bed and wake up and something new happens. And so I think we also have to, while we are saying we want to do the best for our students, doing that is also preparing our educators to be able to do that. And so the professional development needs to happen as well.
Thank you so much for sharing that insight. Also, as I mentioned before, want to, when you have time, I think for perhaps one last question. We've talked a lot, and I think Carrie sort of started this part of the conversation when she talked about there's a lot out there. And then Dr. Beta talked a little bit about, well, in my district, we're making sure to vet some of the tools and things come out. So this question was for all. It said, how can the state help ensure that districts are making the appropriate decisions regarding policies and the tools that they're using, given the sheer volume of different program districts are using? And given the sort of time that we have left, rapid response. Anyone that wants to
Rapid response, I'll be quick. The
Okay.
AI task force has been reconvened this year. We doubled in size, and the AI task force is currently putting together an AI implementation guide for districts, as well as a guide on how to select AI or AI-enabled tools.
I'm going to jump in and be a little political here because there's some folks that can't, but I can. Parents and families, you're going to need to advocate. What we're hearing AJ talk about is not regulations, but recommendations. And that is because we have local control of schools. So if you're not happy with what's happening in your district, you better show up at your school board or your school committee and ask some tough questions. Because again, there's no laws being passed here. There are not regulations. These are recommendations. And unless you hold your district accountable for following through on those recommendations, which I think for the most part are very good coming from the state, they don't have to follow them. You're going to have to make them do it.
Again, and that's part of the reason why we started a task force, and I didn't jump right away. I was waiting for guidance. And I agree. I think the guidance that we have from the state is solid, and including parents, families, and administrators and teachers on the AI task force was important to me. So I feel like it's important sometimes to go slow, to go fast, and make sure the policies and what we have is something that is, again, providing the guardrails, but also making sure that our students are safe and that our families feel comfortable with what we're doing in our district.
Thank you. Dr. Natras, wondering if you have any words before we close out?
I would say that we need to continue these conversations. We need to dig into the complexities of these conversations and the nuances of what this looks like within our schools and classrooms. And also remember that this is changing the ways in which we live, the ways in which we work. And we are working all together to try to provide our students with the opportunities to prepare them both for this moment in time and for where things are going to be 5 years from now and 10 years from now. And it is important that all of our voices are part of that conversation and that we are all engaged in the discussion around what this looks like moving forward.
Thank you. Those are exactly where sort of my wrap up or closing remarks. I think we learned from the poll results and as well as the conversation that AI is here to stay. It continues to evolve maybe day by day. And while there is a lot of opportunities, there also are real challenges that I think we need to continue to address with safety guardrails, with more policy, with, as Carrie mentioned, some on the ground sort of action or policy as well. Thank you all for coming today for sharing your reactions to the poll, as well as offering some of what you're seeing across the state, across the country, and what more needs to be done. I think based on the conversation where there's still a lot of gray, a lot of opportunities, a lot to learn, we should keep the conversation going, as well as we didn't get to, I think, half of the question in the Q&A. So I think there is a lot of sort of questions and opportunity to, as I mentioned, keep on going. While I'm mentioning keep on going, if you sort of miss any part of today's conversation, feel free to either visit the Mass Inc. Website or EdTrust, where we will have the presentation as well as the key finding and other information, as well as the recording from today. And as Jenny mentioned at the beginning, this statewide parent poll has been going since the onset of the pandemic, so more to come. If you have any thoughts of suggestions on what else we should be talking about, we've covered everything from the literacy crisis to math to college and career planning to now AI. Feel free to reach out directly to us or maybe drop a suggestion in the chat. But thank you all again. As I mentioned, I think today's conversation is the beginning of many, so please be on the lookout. Thank you all again.
Thank you.